Hi, I'm Christopher Warnock of Renaissance Astrology, and today I'm going to talk about Renaissance magic, Botticelli, and our new edition of Venus Three Graces Talismans. So it's interesting, I start off all my videos saying Renaissance Astrology, and I think it's useful to emphasize that I didn't pick the name Renaissance Astrology because I thought it was cool, but it's an accurate representation of it. It's just like this is the astrology of the Renaissance. So it's just like calling it Italian grocery. I mean, it's a grocery store that sells Italian food. Renaissance astrology, we do the Renaissance, the astrology of the Renaissance. I was very, very inspired by the high culture of Renaissance. There's, I could have called it medieval astrology, but which is, very similar to Renaissance astrology. I think they're unified enough to talk about them. I usually say medieval Renaissance, but the Renaissance was what really inspired me. And that's because that spirit of the Renaissance, that spirit of rebirth, that I found so inspiring was manifested in so many different ways. So particularly the visual arts and architecture, sculpture, and painting. These are a visual manifestation of the incredible creativity of the Renaissance, which took place in many other ways as well. Philosophy, writing, humanism, the sort of revival of the classical learning and things like that. And this, coming out of it's really not fair to call it the Dark Ages, but coming from into a new age, really the beginning of the modern period. So what I'm going to talk about today, and this really was the inspiration for the Three Graces Talisman, but I think it's very useful in terms of understanding the Renaissance and the connection between esotericism and art. Is this very iconic painting, Sandro Botticelli's Primavera, which Primavera means spring in Italian. This very famous painting, very iconic painting, and I'll just briefly, so you know what I'm talking about, just show it and we'll come back to it later. Again, you're probably all very familiar with this painting and have seen it before. So again, Botticelli's Primavera. This was painted in the late 15th century in Florence, which was under the rule of the Medici, who had a very positive influence on art, or patrons of art, and really, very much part of this incredible efflorescence of culture. As I said, revival of classical learning and humanism, but also lots of new artistic styles, really quite beautiful and inspiring, as well as being, particularly when we're talking about Florence and the Medici, the rebirth of this secret stream of Western esotericism. And so, one view was that Botticelli was advised on the mythological themes of Primavera by Marsilio Ficino, priest, philosopher, astrological magician, head of the Florentine Academy, translator of the Corpus Hermeticum. So, incredibly key source for in Western esotericism, very keyed into the tradition, very knowledgeable about Hermetic magic, Hermetic philosophy. And then Ficino was, of course, the author of 3 books on life, which is, again, a key astrological magic source text. The typical approach to Primavera as an academic is going to be do a lot of theorizing. They like to argue about stuff. They're going to insist that they're right and everybody's wrong. And the reality is that they're really just kind of guessing about it. So again, let's just take a look at the painting itself, just so we can have a sense of it. And move it over here. In the center there, we can see Venus. She's got the very flowing robes there, sort of almost like a red dress or whatever. Incredibly beautiful. So right from the get-go, the astrological factors are very key in this in terms of the mythological and the astrological. It's obviously very important in this painting. And above her is a cherub, Eros, possibly. Again, we're theorizing about this, but what it puts me in mind of is Ficino. What Ficino says is in a commentary on Plato's Symposium, and he says, why do we think that love is a magician? Because the whole power of magic consists in love. Either the attraction thing, which is love, or the opposite of love, which is hatred, which is, again, resolves down to the same thing. So really, when we're talking about love, we're talking about this really underlying nature of the cosmos, this really primal force, and I think that's immediately brought to the forefront by having Venus right there in the center of the painting, and obviously extremely important of it. Talking about other astrological things, we can see off here to Mercury with his caduceus. He's looking up in the sky there. You can see him. Obviously astrological. And then the 3 graces. And so the three graces are Aglia, which means shining, Euphrosyne, which means joy, and Thalia, which means blooming. So again, we've got this painting again that's entitled Spring. We can see the incredible number of flowers. Everything's blooming. The trees are green, and we've got these various mythological figures. I mean, again, you could spend an entire lifetime, which many academics have done, going in and trying to analyze it or decode it. And that's what they do. Academics, what they feel the thing you do is you break it down, you decode it, and then you've got this sort of specific message that was encoded by the artist, and that's what they're all about, trying to find out what they put in there, which is fine for academics. Another approach, and one that's really more in tune with our tradition, with the esotericism, is to see the artist as a conduit from the anima mundi. That all these images, everything exists first in the soul of the world, in the anima mundi, and that the artist is tuning in and then manifests these images that come through them. So they're a channel. They're not the creator. They're not this, this sort of, modern idea of this genius person who's creating it from their own ego self, but rather that they're a conduit, that they're part of something bigger than themselves, and that they're using their craft and their art to manifest these pre-existing images and pre-existing, as I said, pictures that they're making. So again, they're tapping in, as I said, to the soul of the world. In the Islamic context, as Sufism, talk about the Alam al-Mathal, the world of images, the astral realm. Again, these are all, is in a sense, artistry is a type of magic. And this is what we're doing with talismans, okay? We're using them as a way to connect us to the anima mundi. And the specific sense of astrological talismans, we're going through the celestial angels. So these images are a very powerful encapsulation of the anima mundi. They're not just made up stuff. This is stuff that's inherent, underlying. The images, it's like a picture speaks 1,000 words, has this encapsulated power and connection to it. The other way to think about it is occult virtue. Again, occult virtue manifesting through the anima mundi, and it can manifest, for example, as ratios, as sigils and symbols. It's a very, very powerful manifestation of occult virtue or anima mundi, and much more powerful than material things. I mean, because we're coming out of this atheistic materialistic approach, people tend to be very, very focused on materials, and they think the magic is in the talisman, and the magic comes from the material of the talisman, and it's scientific in some ways, energy or some charge like that. What we're, again, keying into here is this older view, this more authentic view of the Western esotericism that sees the entire cosmos as being one great unified being, and then focuses on these interconnections, focuses on these various means of connection. And the key connection we use as astrological magicians is through the celestials. And again, the embodiment of the celestials is through these images. And so rather than, again, thinking about it as energy, what we can think about is the fact that the image of Venus is Venus, that Venus is present there in that image. And that power comes from the fact that we're actually directly interacting with this manifestation of Venus, who's infinite different possible manifestations. But again, there's incredible power in something that's beautiful, that engages our attention, that engages our heart, that engages our creativity, that really engages our inner Venus and energizes that, so to speak. And that's one of the things that really drew me, as I said, to Renaissance astrology, but also then to Botticelli's Primavera. Now, let me talk a little bit about the Venus Three Graces talisman. Picatrix has a Venus talisman, and the talisman description is three people holding each other. That's the image description. And immediately when I saw that, I thought, this reminds me of the Three Graces in Primavera. And so what Picatrix says is this image of Venus brings fortune and profit. Now that's very unusual for Venus. I mean, when we think of Venus, she likes to have money. She certainly likes to spend money, but she's really not so great at getting money. So it's extremely unusual to have a Venus talisman that's also good for profit. As well, with these talismans, they have the general Venus powers of love, of friendship, of pleasure, joy, creativity, the arts. These are, always manifesting through Venus with this additional idea of having the profit as well. So let me just show you again. This is the image, and you can see again, this is directly from Botticelli's Primavera. These are the three graces, and you have the three people holding themselves, but in a gorgeous, beautiful way. Very evocative, very powerful image. Again, manifesting from the Alam al-Mathal. I mean, we have to look at Botticelli as somebody who really is connected into that whole Western esotericism and understands, consciously or unconsciously, likely consciously, of the power of the images and the connection to the celestials that they produce. So let me show you also the You can see then there's the image of the three graces on the beautiful bronze talismans. So I really feel privileged to be able to basically be part of this. I mean, none of this was coming from my ego self. I really felt inspired to do this, and I'm drawing on this tradition, but I think in a really useful and creative way. We're taking this gorgeous image that very much fits the description, and we're tying together these themes of Renaissance art, of the L'Alma Mathal, of the Anima Mundi, and of the Picatrix image description to create this incredibly powerful talisman of Venus, the Venus Three Graces talisman. So again, very happy to have another edition of these. Check out that link you can see on the web page for the Venus Three Graces talismans, and I hope you'll find them as entrancing and illuminating as I have. These have certainly been extremely popular talismans. People really have enjoyed them very much. We've got excellent testimonials from about the Three Graces talisman, so many people have been happy with them. As always, if you're interested in getting a Renaissance astrology talisman, if you're serious about it, you can contact me. You can see the contact information is there. Send me an email with your date of birth, and what I'll do is check talisman compatibility. I can see whether the Venus talismans are compatible with you, and then also I can certainly make suggestions as far as if you have specific goals or if you just would like some suggestions about what talismans are most compatible with your chart. So again, check that out. Check out the Venus Three Graces talisman and all the talismans that we have inspired by the Renaissance tradition, and as beautiful and illuminating and inspiring as we can make them.